I always loved writing from the time I was in grammar school. I love being creative and making stories. So that was something I was always drawn to. I've worked on just little projects over the year, put a story together, even for myself, or see something interesting, write it down or write about it. And I would say for anybody who wants to be a writer, just write a story.
Welcome to a new episode of Most Memorable Journeys. My guest today is in New York City, and I'm very glad that he contacted me because this is going to be an interesting episode. He is a retired New York City fire captain and the author of several books. And he spends several months, 2 to 3 months, in Italy every year. Welcome to Most Memorable Journeys, Andrew Serra.
Thank you for having me, Elizabeth.
It's a pleasure, and I'm looking at you, and I see that you have you're wearing a short sleeve shirt. Is it warm in New York?
No, it's freezing outside. Well, I live on the ground floor of my building, though. I have steam pipes in the wall that keep it nice and toasty in here.
Okay, that's pleasant then.
Yeah.
Now, you are the author of several books, and one book that sort of stuck. I sort of couldn't stop looking at. I haven't read it. I haven't had time. Is Finding John? Is that?
Yeah.
That is about 9/11, isn't it? And you were on duty on that day, right?
Yes, I was. And it was Finding John was published in 2018, and it's I like to call it half memoir, half investigative history. So it's based on my experiences of the time on the day of September 11th and the months that followed.
When you went to work, or did you already know when you went to work that it had happened, or did you just go to work and then found
I was home. I was supposed to be off that day. I had traded shifts with a colleague. And as soon as it happened, like all firefighters in the city, I reported into my firehouse. And we loaded up some gear on a truck. The fire trucks assigned to my fire station had already left with, on-duty members for the as soon as it happened. But we got there. We borrowed actually a tool truck from a hardware store across the street from the firehouse, and we loaded up some gear and drove in. And we got there. We arrived in Lower Manhattan right around the time of the second collapse.
Oh, wow. So you actually watched it go down?
I was a couple of blocks away, and the debris cloud came down the block. I wasn't actually at the scene yet. No.
Yeah.
It was.
So this day, I can imagine what happened after that. Do you actually remember what happened? Do you go there? Do you do this on autopilot, or did you, what is your memory of this day?
It's funny, because on the one hand, I like to say, on the one hand, it's all a blur, and but then on the other hand, individual memories pop up, or something will remind me, and things are clear as day. I have very specific memories of, little moments or here and there. As the day progressed, and then obviously the weeks and months afterwards, which it was an ongoing.
Yeah. So is there trauma? Did you feel that you were traumatized?
I was fortunate. I mean, I lost a lot of friends that day, obviously, and I didn't lose a family member. Like some colleagues and some people I know lost a direct family member, or some people themselves. Obviously people were killed, but other people were in the collapse, or injured badly. And I've consider myself fortunate in all those regards, obviously. I didn't feel like I was traumatized at the time, you know. I think I held on to a lot of feelings, and I think little perhaps anger or issues inside, deep inside, and that's really what led to me to write my book. And I started writing, I believe, in 2016. It was I had written books before that. I published historical novels, and people had asked, over the years, oh, are you ever going to write about 9/11? I'm sure, you can have stuff to write about. And I always said no before. I never really thought I could. And one day in about 2016, I was sitting I had my laptop computer with me, and I just had this idea, and I wrote the first chapter. I just sat down and wrote it. And I said to myself, that wasn't, you know, I think I could do this, and then I took a step back, and that's where I started doing a lot of research. And there was one particular issue I really wanted to delve into. And I think the research and the writing of it was like my therapy in a way, 15 some odd years down the road.
That's amazing because I'm a life coach and I have often clients who come to see me with, all sorts of trauma. And I always tell them to write it down because, and actually use a method, like feel that it goes through your arm in the laptop or on the paper, and then it's out of your system. And I think that's probably what happened to you. That's why it was your therapy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, you call it a firehouse. Is a firehouse a station that you are, like where you are assigned to?
Yeah, that's what we refer to our, the building that houses the fire engines and fire trucks and the personnel. We call it a firehouse here, and other
Yeah.
countries call it a fire station. It's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you had been on duty, let's say, if you had already been there, could it be that you would have been on site when the towers collapsed? It could have been inside.
I would have. Yeah, my company was in the buildings when it collapsed. Half the members of my firehouse were killed in the collapse immediately, and the other half survived the collapse, and they had to crawl out of the debris. And just as they got outside, the second building came down and on top of them, and they lived. They survived the collapse. So half of them died, half of them lived. They were standing a few feet away from each other, but
amazing. And did you have guilt? Because I know that people who were supposed on a plane and then they don't go on that plane, and then that plane.
Yeah. The colleague who I had switched shifts with, he survived. I mean, he was injured, and I'm sure he lives with a lot. And I suppose there has been some forms of guilt over the year. I think it would have been much, much worse had he died,
Yeah.
Because I know I have friends who are in that boat, and I think at times they struggled with it.
Yeah, I could imagine. Well, it's now, when was 2001, right? It's 24 years. It's crazy how time flies. And you are, in the meantime, retired. But you have, okay, 9/11 was a big thing, but I am sure you have experienced a lot of other interesting stuff while you were a firefighter in.
Sure. There's busy times, there's not so busy times, but never a dull moment,
Can you imagine? Is there any good stories? There must be there's good stuff as well. You help people.
People ask all the time, and it's tough to have them on the tip of my tongue. I'll see a building or I'll see a situation or somebody say, and I have 1,000 stories, but I can never think of them on demand, you know. I'll be
Yeah, I
reminded
know.
of something, or just sometimes, just the simplest things, people see the movies and firefighters carrying someone out of a burning building, and obviously that's a wonderful thing when it that it's a happy outcome when it happens. But just the little things on the day, sometimes we get just very minor calls and somebody's having an issue, or they're stuck in an elevator, or they had a little minor car accident, or they're injured, or just something small, and we show up and we get to make the day a little bit better, and they smile and say thank you, and those little moments I think mean always meant a lot to me.
Yeah, I think they are much more important, and they are more often and more important than the big ones. I think life consists of all the little moments and the good ones. Now, I was wondering, because you chose to live in Italy several months a year, is your family name Serra? Are you of Italian origin?
I am. I'm a third generation American. My dad's side is Italian American, but my wife grew up in Italy, so
Oh,
her family is from Basilicata, and they always came back and forth. My wife had been born here in New York, but then at a young age, moved back to Italy and lived there until she was ready to start high school, and then they came back. So she has always been back and forth, and always had strong ties to Italy. So, and once we met and were married, the tradition just continued of visiting a lot, and finally, we had scrimped and saved and planned, and a few years ago we were able enough to find a place in Umbria, which we loved to go back to every year. So
it's a bit of it's very less noisy than New York City, I can imagine, where you go.
yeah, and that's what we love about Umbria. We're not really near any major cities. It's just a couple of small towns near us, and we're out in the country, out in the farmland and hills, and that we wanted the opposite of New York.
Yeah, I understand. I can imagine. But you do go. I mean, you go to like it's a bit like me. We have a place in Switzerland, but I live in Cyprus, and I think you end up feeling really blessed because you have the best of both worlds.
We do, and a little each year we go back, and we feel like more and more part of the community there. The our neighbors and the friends we've made, the locals, they're always so excited every year when we come back, and they make a point to, they come, stop by and say hello, or we meet them for a meal somewhere, and they're really wonderful, kind people, very welcoming, and we feel like we've become like adopted members of the community almost.
Do you speak Italian?
I do.
You
Yeah.
do. Did you grow up when or did you learn Italian while you grew up?
Not really. Like my wife, I said, Italian was her first language, but for
Yes.
me, with Italian relatives, like my grandmother and aunts and uncles, like I would hear, and it was really like dialect words that, phrases here and there. So it was around, but I didn't speak it at all as a child. I didn't learn until I was an adult.
Now, I read about another book. Have you written two books so far?
No, more than that, actually. I would say five altogether.
Okay,
Mostly,
I did not do my research properly, so you're going to have to help me out here a little bit.
no worries, no worries.
There's something about seamstresses that I read. That is in a book, isn't it? Tell me about
That's my latest book. Yes, came out just last month in January. It's the name of the book is Hell's 100 Acres. It's a historical novel which takes place in New York City in the year 1911. Here in New York in 1911, there was a really bad fire in a factory, a garment factory, in which 146 workers were killed. It was a high-rise loft building, and the fire was on the upper floors, and the workers were all trapped above the fire. So many of them had to jump out windows to avoid the fire and died. And it was a very newsworthy, very known event at the time, and it's an important fire. On top of the tragedy of the loss of lives, it's important because it led to a lot of the safety measures, workplace safety and fire safety that we have today come from that fire. So,
Yeah, that's the sad part, isn't it? In general, something bad has to happen first until,
almost all safety laws, right, come from
yeah, yeah.
tragedy of some kind.
Not only fire, but cars flying, all sorts.
Everything. You
Yeah, why does it have to happen like that first before people realize?
I think it could be two things I think of. It's either, greed, which, it costs money to do things safer. So until there's enough outrage or public demand for something, I think profit motive is always going to win out. But I think sometimes it's not even greed. It's just the human imagination can only imagine so many things. And if you plan for A, B, and C to go wrong, and you take measure, and then one day D goes wrong,
Yeah, that's
and
true.
then now you have a new rule for D.
Yeah, yeah. You cannot always foresee everything. That is really
Yeah.
true. I mean, but there are things that sometimes,
Yeah.
they
Oh,
think
this fire was highly predictable. A lot of officials at the time warned of the dangers of it. And that's what I tried to bring out in the story. A lot of the characters at the time, known figures, had been fighting for fire safety, before the fire, and the seamstresses themselves, who I try to really tell their story in this book. A year before, had gone on strike to improve conditions. So they were in the public spotlight already for having gone on strike to try and change things, and just they came back to work, and then a little over a year later, this fire happens.
amazing. So they kind of knew that it could come. That's
Yeah, for sure.
crazy. Now, coming back to your Italian roots, did you go to Italy as a child? Did your family travel to Italy with you or no?
No,
No.
no, I didn't go to Italy until I was in my 30s. And it's kind of a funny story timing. A friend of mine and I, another firefighter who I worked with, we both decided one day we should go to Italy. So, we planned out this whole trip months in advance, maybe 6 or 8 months in advance. And I decided, you know what, since we're going to go anyway, I want to learn Italian. So I got myself a computer program and loaded it up and started practicing Italian every day in the meantime. And then right around the time we're leaving for the trip, this is the fall of 2007, is when I met my wife, my future wife. So it was she was going. Just coincidence, at the very same time she had planned a family trip with her family. They went to Sicily. So we were kind of traveling together, but nowhere near each other, and hadn't really met yet. We just spoke, and then we came back. We met and started dating, and it was just perfect timing. I had begun to study Italian anyway, so then that's when I dove head first into it to really put my mind to learning Italian, and really fell in love with visiting Italy and going back and forth also.
With everything and with the
Yeah.
Italian lady.
Yes.
Did you travel as a child at all? Did your family travel? No.
Very locally. I think went to Florida, from New York once or twice as a kid. My dad, was a truck driver, worked long hours. My mom was always juggling one or two jobs, and just, typical story of, working class. And, I think maybe Florida twice, and we would drive every summer for like a long weekend. We would drive up to Lake George, New York. There's
Upstate.
yeah, upstate, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that was our annual routine. It would be maybe be like a 4-day trip or 5-day trip, and that was about it as a kid. Not too many trips,
It
not
was,
not, not very far, memorable, but not far.
well, that's the thing. You see, it doesn't always have to be far to be memorable. And, working when you are from a working class family, it's more about survival or about living, and being able to feed everybody and not those fancy trips that many people do. How old were you when you were on a plane for the first time?
A plane, you know, I, I don't remember the trip obviously, but I think one of those trips to Florida I mentioned, I was
Okay.
like
Yeah.
2 or 3 years old that my parents, took. I think it was before either of my brothers were born, so I have pictures, and then went back again maybe when I was like 13 or 14, flew again, and then it was, and then once I was out of high school, I went away with my friends a few times, and down to the Caribbean on some cruises and stuff like that. So I was on planes then.
Yeah, this is the thing we often forget that the Caribbean is not far away from New York. It's like a 3-4 hours. It's
Yeah.
different from Europe. For us, it's a long distance flight.
Yeah, it's a pretty common vacation spot for the East Coast of the U.S. for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, there's cruise ships that leave out of New York that go.
Yes, I go to the Caribbean.
Yeah.
New York is your city. You were born in New York, so you're a proper New York. Let's talk a little bit about New York because I worked there for a while and I absolutely love New York. And many people tell me that I'm crazy because it's loud and it stinks and I don't know what else. So, what do you like about New York, or what do you not like about New York City?
You know, I think somebody once described it. A news. I forget it. Bill Madden, I think. No, not Bill Madden. A famous reporter for the Daily News. I have the name wrong, not Bill Madden. But he said, New York City is the city that I love and hate equally. And I think that's a good way to describe it. There's so many wonderful things. We live now in Midtown Manhattan, and my kids love the theater. We're less than a mile away from Broadway. So, my wife, she's online. If she sees a special deal for tickets, her and my daughter will just walk over to a show. It's like, it's at least once a month or more where we can see a show. There's restaurants. There's just everything you need is right outside our doorstep. Museums, just really everything is all around. So that stuff we love. Sometimes the noise, the traffic, the constant, every day there's jackhammering outside the window, or there's sirens going by in the middle, and there's always something. But you take the good with the bad.
I think the sirens are just something that, when you watch a movie and it happens in New York, there are sirens. There have to be sirens, whether it's necessary or
It's
not.
just a question of if it's right outside your window or 8 blocks away. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the background noise. So you will stay in New York. Italy is just for holidays.
Well, we go right now every summer. The kids go to school here, so for until they're done with school, they're still, my daughter was almost 15 and my son is 10, so they still have, a ways to go with school. And we like the opportunities afforded to them going to school here in New York. So I think for the time being, that's our plan. And we we hold our breath and wait for the last day of school. And, the last few years, our routine is the very evening of the last day of school, we're on a plane to Italy.
Amazing. Could you imagine that when your kids are grown up that you would be staying longer when they live their own lives? Would you like to be
For
in
sure, yeah. Definitely,
yeah.
maybe splitting the year up or something like that. My wife, with me, having retired from the fire department and moving towards other things, whether it's writing or something. And my wife, she works remotely. So really, we're not tied to be, we can work from wherever we are. So I think once the kids are a little bit older, we can definitely spend more time
Mm.
writing.
I tell me about the other books. We have talked about two now, but you said there are five. What are the other three?
Historical novels. My first book came out in 2012. It was called The Dead Florentines. It's a historical novel about the Italian Renaissance, based mostly in Florence. And then in 2015, another historical novel called La Petite Parisienne. It's about the French Revolution.
Okay.
And then in 2022, I have a novella that was out called Zuccotti Park. It's based in New York. It's about the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Are they all available on Amazon?
Yeah,
Okay, so
all available on Amazon.
we will put the links in the show notes. I think it's quite fascinating that a fire captain is an author. How did you start writing? How does one give it for the people who are listening to us, who are, thinking about it? Because I'm sure you thought about it before you did it.
I've always loved writing from the time I was in grammar school. I love being creative and making stories. So that was something I was always drawn to. I've worked on just little projects over the year, put a story together, even just for myself, or see something interesting, write it down or write about it. And I would say for anybody who wants to be a writer, just write a story. Writing is, it's an old craft, but at the end of the day, it's storytelling. So, and that's the most, come up with an intro, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, right? You're telling the story of something, and write your story down and then work on ways that, make it as interesting as possible and take it from there. And
Yeah. How did you publish? Did you find a publisher when you with your first book, or did you self-publish?
No, I self-published my first book, and then by the time the second and third were coming out, I shopped it around a little bit, and I ended up actually just creating my own publishing company.
Well, that's that's the best thing to do, isn't it?
Yeah, so
But
independently published now.
do you only but you don't only publish your books, you publish other people's books?
So far, just my own books.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I'll be taking on a whole other level. And now that I have more time, I may move in that direction because I do enjoy the process of putting a book together. As much as the editing process can be tedious and getting notes and back and forth and sending manuscripts off to editors and getting notes back and revisions. Looking back on it, it's always the creation is I enjoy it. So I think that could be something I think I would enjoy doing.
Yeah, because I have a friend who is an author, and she always says that the easiest part is actually writing the book, and then the complicated part is editing and formatting and printing and
Yeah.
finding. Yeah.
I laugh all the time. I tell people, the description for the cover, the back, it's 200 words, 300, maybe 200 words on the back. And I said, I swear it's easier to write a 200 word book than a 200 page book than it is to write a 200 word description of the book. It's like, it's
Because that's
try and pare it
important.
down.
That's maybe the reason why people buy the book or not.
Yeah. And to try and describe, how whether if a book is 80,000 words and 300 pages or whatever it is, and to try and boil it down to just a couple hundred words and get its essence and all its things like that, it can take me weeks sometimes. You do it, you crumble it up, throw it out, try it again.
Yeah, fascinating. So what's in the pipeline? What are you working on now that the last one is done?
I'm fresh on the heels of just getting this one out to the world, so I'm right smack in the middle of now, trying to do publicity and marketing and all that stuff for it. We had the book launch a few weeks ago, which was great, but there was a lot of planning for that stuff. I have an ebook series on that's only available in ebook. It's called the Tenement series. That it's about an old tenement building in starting in the 1890s in New York City, with down by the Five Points area, which is a heavy immigrant area of New York City. So it's a story of this one building, and it's I've released two parts already, so I'm overdue for part three. So I've been tinkering with that maybe a little bit, so maybe I'll focus on that once the dust settles from this last book.
I think I saw on Instagram or somewhere where I followed you on social media that you go, because of, I guess, because you have your own publishing company, you go to book fairs.
Yeah, I've made the rounds in the past to a few of them. They're always a lot of fun. You get to meet other authors and other publishers, but also a lot of readers who come around and talk
Which
to them.
ones are which ones are good book fairs, in your
You know,
opinion?
there used to be one called BookCon. It was there's an organization called Book Expo, which is really for like large and small publishers of all sizes. That it's huge. They would take over the Javits Center here in New York for 3 or 4 days. But on the last day, they called it BookCon, and it was really just for authors and readers, and they would sell tickets to the public. And I always enjoyed that a lot. We said, I would get to meet a lot of readers. They would always show a lot of interest and ask a lot of good questions about the books and everything. They stopped doing it during COVID, and they haven't started it again. So maybe someday they'll start that up again.
Yeah, yeah. Now, coming back to traveling, do you have a dream destination? If you could just wish to go somewhere, no money would not be wouldn't matter. Where would you go?
Oh,
I know that's a
it's so tough. There's so many places in Europe I'd love to see. That I haven't been to Greece, I haven't been to Spain. There's lots of places like that. Then there's also places just around the world. I as much as I love to travel, I hate to fly, if that makes
huh?
sense. So places like Hawaii, Australia, or Southeast Asia, like Japan or something. I would love to see those places. Maybe when somebody invents teleportation or something,
I don't think that's going to happen for a while.
yeah, 15 or 18 hours on an airplane seems like a lot to me. But maybe someday I'll work my way towards it and bite the bullet and take the journey.
Did you have a bad experience, or is it what do you feel?
I can't really pinpoint it. I just don't like the feeling of being, strapped in this flying hunk of metal.
Yeah, I think it's more because I do fear of flying hypnosis. It's not being in control.
Yeah, that could be it.
Giving up control, being
I was
in.
up in a I was up in a Cessna, like a very small propeller plane one time, and they ask you your weight when you're getting on the plane, so they tell you where to sit. And they sat me right up front next to the pilot. So I was and I felt fine. You
Mm-hmm.
would think that'd be the plane you'd be, scared to death to go on,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
Oh,
felt
no.
much better there than I do just, buckled in row 44B,
Uh, because you think that you could just open the door and jump out if something goes wrong.
It really defies logic, there's no,
Totally, totally. But I understand that because I also, like when I speak to people who do come for hypnosis, they feel fine in a car, and which is much more dangerous than a plane. But because they feel that they are still in control, even though they're not.
right. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're coming to the end. Um, just a little, I want to speak about Italy a little more because it's also one of my favorite countries. You go to Umbria. Do you travel? Do you get a car? Do you travel around Italy when you're there?
Yeah, we usually, we've hooked up with this company in our area. They do long-term rentals. We found that to be more easier than trying to buy a car and have it sit for long periods. So we have a car usually the time we're there, and it's great. We get to travel around both Umbria and the immediate area, and because of my wife's line of work, she's an Italian vacation planner for
Okay.
so mostly Americans, but really for anybody who's traveling to visit Italy, that's what she does. So while we're there, a lot of times we'll try to visit, a new region or a new city or a new area to familiarize ourselves with it. So she has a frame of reference for her clients and stuff like that. So that's part of what we try to branch out a little bit and see different areas of Italy, each year.
That's important because then she knows what she's talking about when she recommends things to people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very nice job to have. I think I think that is probably one of the most satisfying things to do but then again, on the other hand, I find it always difficult to recommend something to someone because not everybody likes the same things you like, it's quite
Yeah,
hard.
that's true. You can tell them your experience and give
Yes.
them recommend them, and then it's out of your hands out of that after that.
Yeah. Well, we are looking forward to the next book if there is one. We're going to put all the links in the show notes. And I want to thank you for being on Most Memorable Journeys today, Andrew Serra.
Well, this is great. Thank you so much for having me.
If you enjoy my podcast, please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. You will find all the information in the show notes.